You are listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Greg Driver. I'm joined by Rahul Johnny and Leon Everett. Let's go! Happy New Year and welcome to the 103rd episode of Ace Comicals. It is now 2021. Not that you'd notice. Joining me today is Rahul.
Hello guys, Happy New Year.
And Leon.
Happy New Year, everybody.
So, yeah, we're finally out of 2020, but for some reason it doesn't really feel like it, does it? It's like 2020 is like hanging on the edge of the cliff with its fingernails, refusing to just fall. Why? Why won't you fall into the lava, 2020? Why?
It's like the end of a Scooby-Doo episode. You pull the mask off 2020 just to reveal 2021. It's going to keep happening for the next forever.
Something like that. But yeah, I mean, at least there's kind of an end in sight now. So we've got like we've got an end in sight. There's an end point, like
as in like the thermodynamic end of the universe. What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the fact that there's now a vaccine.
Right.
Yeah, for COVID. So it's like there is some hope. It's not like we're going to be stuck confined to our four walls for the rest of our lives and unable to go out drinking and things. So
I found this a really interesting topic to like have with people, a topic of conversation to have with people, because I talk to my colleagues a lot, and some of us have very different viewpoints on how to like deal with this kind of news or deal with this forward thinking optimism. And like I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, I would say I'm like slightly cynical realist, and in the sense that I don't think I have it in me to be prepared for the best. So like the fact that there's a vaccine, available and ready and soon on the horizon and all of that, I'm not gonna start changing my attitude or behavior or like mindset, I think, until it's real. And like it sounds like you don't have the same thing.
Well, no, I'm kind of on board with you, as in I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm certainly not going to be like, ding dong, the witch is dead. Let's all skip around and hug and kiss random strangers and things because we've got a vaccine now.
To suggest that you would like do anything harmful. That's not what I meant. I meant more like in terms of being forward thinking, and like some of my colleagues are already considering, what gigs can we buy tickets for, and what's the first film we're going to go see. I'm like, I can't bring myself to think about those things quite yet.
I'm not doing anything. I'm not thinking like that. What I'm thinking is like I have something that I can hope and anchor myself to. So it's like, rather than thinking, I can now, like, I'm going to buy tickets for this gig at the end of the year because I feel that by then it's all going to be fine or whatever. It's more like I can at least see the end now, and if I can think positively, I guess, in a way. I can try to think positively, and I can try to think that way and try to be a little bit less dour
absolutely.
about the whole thing, I guess. I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm looking for something that I can be happy about, I suppose, and I'm happy about the fact that there's a vaccine. I'm happy about that. So yeah.
It's just interesting, all of our various coping mechanisms, I think.
Yeah.
Like, Leon, where do you stand on that kind of stuff?
I don't really have strong feelings either way, because I would also say that I'm realist / pessimist in a way, but it's more because I'm always cautiously optimistic. But I'm the type of person who wouldn't celebrate Biden's win until the very last news station called it. Like I don't get confident with those things, as I've seen them go the other way too many times. So while I'm hopeful that there's things like vaccines and stuff out there more being approved each week, the fact of the matter is, at the moment in this country, we've got like the worst spikes since it began. So I don't know. even with the vaccines being available, like I've got no idea when they'll be rolled out so that people like you and I are getting them. So yeah, I have a thing where I don't like to rain on other people's parades because different things give people joy, and if this over the horizon is enough to break the dread that we've received so far, having isolations and COVID with us for the best part of last year, then that's cool. But personally, I'm like as careful as I've been, and in terms of thinking forward, I'm not making any plans or anything. I'm not thinking, oh, by the summer I might be able to go on holiday or anything. Like, I'm just taking everything as it comes and being as cautious as I can, really.
Well, I'm somewhere between, like, because I like I'm saying, I like the fact that there's a vaccine is giving me something to hope about. Like, oh, you know, it's nice. There's an end in sight, is what I'm trying. I'm not saying that I am planning a holiday or planning to go to gigs and things or buying tickets for anything, because that's just silly. Because by August, none of this might be over, and we might still not be able to have big events and things like that. As much as I would love to be able to walk into a comics convention hall and walk from table to table and buy physical comics from people and things like that, as much as I'd love to be able to do that, I don't know whether I will be able to do that by the end of this year. It would be nice to be able to do that by the end of this year. And if, you know, I the fact that there's a vaccine lets me know that there is an ending to this somewhere, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I certainly wasn't passing judgment on anyone's, you know, like Leon was saying, whatever gives people hope and the way it manifests, then, you know, to each their own. It's just, I find it a really interesting, like, conversation to have about the way what people look forward to, because I'm just someone who takes it a day at a time, because I don't have it in me to think that far forward. And like we were talking about this before we started recording about, like, I haven't even looked at what comics are coming out in 2021, and we'll get to that shortly, right? Because as you were saying, there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot of creative output that's happening in 2021 that we can, you know, look forward to. So, yeah.
I've decided that I have to start looking forward to things. That's like one of the things that, like, I want to do more of. Because if I don't, and I stew too much in the present, sometimes that's what puts me in a hole. So,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's hard to articulate, and I'd probably have a better answer if I was expecting the question. But,
I'm sorry.
Like, I think we're all in a similar place. It's not about really your actions, but more about your outlook. And I think your outlook, Greg, is quite common and quite a good one. And, like, despite reservations that me and Rahul might have, where we're more just a case of, we'll see how it goes, it might seem like, because we're not in the same position that you are, that we're thinking like, meh, vaccines. And it's like, no, we're both incredulous at, like, how quick the vaccines were done and how amazing that is, and how that people have already started to be vaccinated, and that's an amazing thing considering that this is a novel coronavirus. So yeah, I'm hopeful for things like that, of course, and I'm just always pleasantly surprised at, like, what happened when, like, humanity came together to try and fix something. But then I've always got to temper that for myself in terms of how the governments have been acting with this stuff before and after. So I'm always I'm hopeful that good things will happen quickly, but because it's out of my control and my evidence so far has been to the contrary, I can only be cautious.
So I think what we were trying to say with all of that at the beginning of the episode is Happy New Year, and last year was difficult for everyone, especially the comics industry, on top of all the, all the arts industries, all the arts and the hospitality industries as well, like suffered especially, but like specifically to us, our thing is comics. This is a comics podcast, so yes, the comics industry suffered last year. But I mean, like, even with all the like the shutdown that happened, and with everything that was going on with like comic shops having to shut up and being unable to operate and things like that, people found ways around it, and you know, we're still getting comics into people's hands. People were still able to read and enjoy comics. People were still making comics throughout all of it, and it didn't really a lot of great things came out of 2020 still. A lot of great books. Like, we had a lot of really good creative output still, and a lot of really good comics, and I feel like it was quite a good year for comics despite everything that happened. I don't know how you two saw that.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw multiple ways that people were putting their energies into their creative outlets, and like we talked a lot about, for example, even just picking out one, like the Quarantine comics, the Ice Cream Man series, and like how people were using this time and space and like the friction provided by this new change in the world to, you know, inform the stories they were making and inform the art they were doing. And I saw like part of the joy, part of the glimmers of hope in the doom scrolling was seeing people's artwork and creative outlet. And yeah, I think there was some good stuff that came out of the energy brought out by COVID.
And seeing people helping each other as well, like doing things like for each other, offering things, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, I'm always up for that.
yeah, and like making art for various ends. So like making art that is comforting to people, making art that is, you know, informative to people, and then making art that can be sold and then be used to generate, you know, revenue for charities and, you know, social work and that kind of stuff. I think it you know, you put people in a tragedy and you'll see the best parts of them, hopefully, sometimes. And we saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of hopefulness.
Yeah, I'm always down for hopefulness and seeing people do what they can in these tough times and things like that. And that was one of the things that I enjoyed seeing, like last summer and things, especially like in what I have now termed deepest lockdown. When you know, when we were seeing like a lot of this stuff come out, like people pulling together, like, because there was a point last year when the whole world had shut down effectively. Like, it wasn't just like lockdowns in various countries or in various places in various countries. It was like literally like the whole world was on the same page at one point. And well, I say the whole world, I mean the countries that are in my news orbit, because I mean places like America and France, like Europe and whatever, places on mainland Europe, Britain, etc. Like it felt like everything was in sync for a moment and everyone was shut down at the same time. And that was when you started to get like a lot of this output online and people kind of like talking about it and doing stuff for each other, just to do stuff for each other, just to keep each other sane during that time period, which I think is something very unique that I don't know if you'll ever see anything like that ever again, to be honest. And it was kind of cool when it did happen. But yeah, so, I mean, despite everything that happened last year, there was a lot of cool books and a lot of cool things that came out of last year. So, I mean, we like doing yearly roundups. We've done this for a couple of years now while we've been doing this podcast. So this is going to be our 2020 yearly roundup, I guess, but it's going to be a little bit different this time, because instead of just listing off all the things, like our favourite books for 2020, what we've done is we've come up with like a little bit of a system for the books that we've chosen. So what we've done is we've decided we get one 2020 book each. I've cheated. I've got two. We get one comfort book each because of, you know, like during the hardest times last year, like what comic book did we turn to for comfort and how did that help us and that kind of thing. And we've also got one discovery from last year, which wouldn't necessarily be a 2020 book, but a book that we discovered last year that had been released previously, that had been like just completely missed us, and then we picked it up last year and were pleasantly surprised or really enjoyed it. So what I'm going to do, I'm kick us off by going through my 2020 books, because I'm cheating and I've got to, because it's really difficult for me to pin things down to. I mean, I must have set the precedent for this by now. I always cheat with these things, don't I? I can never just have one. I'm like, I'm terrible at this. But yeah, so the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be BOWIE, Stardust, RAYGUNS, and MOONAGE Daydreams, which I, on the end of year Story X Story live stream, I talked about this book, and I talked about it on an episode of Ace Comicals, episode 89 to be specific, and I'm going to talk about it again now because I just think it's such a great book, and it just has like this beautiful, like, it's this beautiful pop art world that you can just open and just fall into. And it was released in January in 2020, but I didn't pick it up until later on in the year, during like all the stuff that was going on with COVID and whatever. Like after it had hit big, and we were in the midst of the lockdown. It was in June when I picked this up. So I picked it up and I read it, and I just instantly fell in love with this book. It had all kinds of escapism. It was, you know, a meticulously researched and put together biography of David Bowie, who is one of my favorite musicians. I love all his output. I love, like, I talked about this before, but I love his use of identity as you know, the way he would reinvent himself for each release, ever so, like, and these concepts that he would have for each album and things like that, and these stories that he would tell. It's like identity. He was his own. He was the canvas, and like his art was his identity, and he was like communicating that to us via his music, and it's all expertly put out and put together in this graphic novel, in the way that it is told, the way the story is told, the way that Mike Allred illustrates that with, you know, these beautiful colors by Laura and everything else, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I learned a lot from this book, and it gave me escapism. It fueled my other interests. It gave me other things to explore. It opened doors that I didn't even realize were there. Like, so through this book, I gained like a deeper appreciation of Bowie's work, and I was able to listen to his music with new ears, if you will, like with the context that this book provided and things like that. And like, I don't think I would have got that from a prose biography. I think there's something specific about the fact that it was a graphic novel, and in the way that it was put together and displayed, in the way that the art is put together on the page, and the style of the art. I don't think anybody but the Allreds could have made this book. I don't think I could have, like, imagined this book by any other artistic team, or because I just don't think it would work. I think this was preordained that they would make this book in some way, shape, or form, because I don't think anybody else could have done it. And I think it's just such a gorgeous piece of sequential art. And yeah, it's like, it was so bright and bold, and like, I mean, like, Bowie was of our time and our world, but at the same time, he inhabited a different one, and through his art, he took us to that world. And this graphic novel takes us there, and I think it's so immersive. I don't think you could get that from a prose biography, and it was a great thing to have in 2020. So yeah, I have to say that is probably the first book that I'm going to say is one of my top books. I mean, did you guys ever check this out after I read it? Or I don't know if you guys ever went and checked it out. Did you ever check it out, Ray?
No, I didn't get the chance to. Or I didn't read it.
Yeah.
As with so many, it's on my list, and the fact that it's the Alreds, it puts it towards the top of that list. And I've glanced through the artwork and everything. It does look like very much my kind of thing, but no, didn't get around to it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It looks so good, and the way you spoke about it really spoke to me, but I never got around to it.
But yeah, this was totally my thing, and I'm glad that I picked it up and I got to read it. I mean, I was excited about it, and I remember up to getting it and reading it, I kept mentioning it. I kept saying, "Oh, the Bowie book, it's on my list. I should buy the Bowie book." I called it the Bowie book. I should buy the Bowie book. It's on my list. Let's get the Bowie book. I wonder if they've got the Bowie book if I go in. If I'm feeling particularly flushed today, I might walk out of the comic shop with the Bowie book. And I just kept going on like that. But then eventually I did actually end up with it. And I'm glad I did. Because it's great. That is Bowie, subtitle Stardust, Rayguns, and MOONAGE Daydreams. Your list of credits for that, which I'll just roll through now. You've got it is written by Mike Allred and Steve Horton. Colors by Laura Allred, and assistance by from Han Allred as well, and forward by Neil Gaiman. So yeah, the forward's pretty cool as well. Actually, it's altogether a cool piece to have in your collection. It's very unique, and I think it's probably one of the better things to come out of last year. Ray, do you want to give us one of your top 2020 books, or your top 2020 book?
Yeah, I'm not you, Greg. I have one top 2020 book that I picked. Not to say that I don't have multiples in another category, but we'll get to that. So I just want to preface this by saying, COVID and dealing with COVID and being at home, work from home, and all that stuff, and all of the things that I sort of dredged up at the beginning of this show, which I didn't intend to do any derailing with, but the reason I talk about it is because it's at the top of my mind in everything I do right now. And I think the last year, 2020, was particularly difficult in for my means of enjoying things. And long story short, I thought there was a point towards the end of 2020 where I'd genuinely fallen out of love with reading comics, I felt. And what I really appreciate is that you've given us this structure to sort of think about what we've read and what we engaged with and why we engaged with it. And it made me realize, no, I didn't actually fall out of love with comics, because I've gone back and revisited a bunch that we talked about over the last year, and really rediscovered some of the things that I loved. And in doing so, I realized that my favorite comic, the thing that I enjoyed the most, that generally just gave me the most amount of joy, was Finger Guns. And that may come as no surprise, because it's the one that I think I've talked about the most, where previously that might have been Giant Days or Ms. Marvel or something. I think 2020 was the year that I talked about Finger Guns a lot. And so this is it's a book by Justin Richards, art by Val Halverson, colors by Rebecca Nolte, letters by Taylor Esposito, and it's a Vault Comics book. And it's, in short, a story about lost souls finding each other. I think that's how I would summarize it. The reason I originally got into it was because, as with so many comics, I just loved the style of it. I love the cartoony, sort of colorful, grainy sugar paper texture that the comic has. I love the luminescent backgrounds and candy coated gradients all going on. And and then I dived in, and as we've discussed in episodes, let me just check, 86 and 94, which I've talked about, the comic begins as a story of two teenagers, Wes and Sadie, discovering that they have the power to alter people's behaviors using the titular finger guns. They can point at people and go pew pew and change the way they behave. And it quickly expands from that to be a story about how these kids, who have pretty different outlooks on life, but both with tragic and difficult home lives in their various forms, are both capable and incapable of leveraging these powers to improve their situations. And the magic, while initially sparking the plot, generally takes second place to the story of their blossoming friendship and the successes and failures in supporting each other, and the traumas of coming from broken homes. And it has some extremely sobering and extended depictions of domestic violence, but not in a way that feels exploitative or shocking, or like it's not there to just shock you. But there's a clear empathy there, and an understanding of the effects that this kind of situation has on children. And like ultimately, it's a really tender story, which hits some key genre beats of teenagers coming of age, discovering they have powers. But it isn't trite, and despite like the core subject matter about the domestic violence, it finds time to find some really joyful moments. You get scenes of the teenagers enjoying each other's company, or like finding commonalities, and like enjoying music together, and making each other brave, and making each other joyful. And like, I don't know, I think that whole package just really worked for me. So yeah, definitely book of 2020 for me, Finger Guns.
Yeah, Leon, you viewed your 2020 book.
Yeah, before I start, I just want to echo some of that love. I didn't catch up, but what I read of Finger Guns at the time was really good. And there's an inherent, I don't know, pureness or sweetness just to the whole atmosphere, I'd say, which made it like a fun comic to engage with. But yeah, so my pick this year, there was a lot of good books, a lot of books that I enjoyed. Though I think that the majority of them didn't come from this year, but one that did was HEDRA by Jesse Lonigan. And me and Greg spoke about this comic a few months back. I believe it was episode 93, so not that far, not that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna interject it because I almost put that on my list, but then I would have had 3, and that's like triple cheating. So,
but yeah,
Leon, take it away.
Yeah, if you've listened to that episode, you know my thoughts. So I won't super double up. I'll just say that I think the thing that I really enjoyed about this book is there is a pureness to the art. It is pure sequential art, a story being told through images and images only. And the way that's done is so elegant, so clean. There's like an almost geometry to the like panel layouts, to the page layouts, to the way that the rules are often bent and broken in terms of what we're used to in storytelling from Western left to right comics. But this manages to do all of these things without feeling gimmicky or without feeling kind of slight. Instead, you get quite a rich story, but I think a lot of it is from inference and that whole adage of like an image speaks 1,000 words or whatever. I think this is a very good example of that being true. And like there's so much meticulous and dense just arrangement of certain panels, the way how on certain pages you'll get a style, something new that hasn't been there before, going from like the those like sort of blown out diagrams that show you all the different bits of a machine and they're all labeled. You get that style to pages that have over 30 panels on one page and they're all showing you different beats, increasing in intensity.
Because it's 30 odd panels a page. It's almost intimidating when you first glance at it, because it's what I would term prog comics, because
Yes.
it really is like very, very geometrical, very precise, very mathematical. And at the same time, it just completely blows the whole concept of sequential art wide open, and really does play with sequential art in a unique way. And yes, like when you look at these 30 odd panel pages, it can almost appear intimidating out of context, but it's surprisingly easy to follow still.
It really is. And so much is done in so little time, and like I said, with no textual exposition, but you're never really lost in the story. And the color palette at times is like fairly simple. You got a color for the character, a color for the sky, and a color for the surroundings at times. But the way these things overlap and interact with each other just make it a joy to continue reading. And yeah, that in ways the comic's saying a lot about a few different things. And I'm not going to prescribe really what I think it's mostly about, but I think that you can take away a lot of different things in this, especially like hopeful things and like evolution and like looking to the future. There's a lot of goodness in here, and I really enjoyed my time with it. And it's a book that I can see myself returning to just because it is a pleasure to read and it looks so nice. And a lot of the pages could by themselves just be posters and prints that I would hang up on my wall. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got much more to say about this apart from check it out. It's a one-shot, published by Image Comics, and I think whatever you get out of it, it'll be different to what you get from anything else.
I never spoke to you guys about this, but I did actually read this a little while ago, and echoing a lot of what you said. Like I love these kind of tonal pieces where, I mean, you know my lack of love for writing in comics. Like give me no text, give me literally nothing, just give me artwork that I can interpret from piece to piece to piece. And this, like you were saying, Greg, intimidating amount of sequential frames per page, and like I really dig that. I like the like blueprint exploded diagram construction aspect to it. Like sometimes it felt like my favorite part about it sounds really not my favorite part. One of the things I actually love about building Lego is looking through the instruction manual. Like I'm one of those people, I like building Lego kits. I don't necessarily always have the mindset to be given a box of random Lego, but give me a kit that I can follow with a really well crafted instruction manual, and then a thing that you can be proud of where you have the tangible aspect of building it. This comic gives me that feeling where you get to see the construction piece by piece by piece slowly building up, block by block, and like the how mechanically constructed it is, how geometrically focused it is. All of that stuff really spoke to me. And as Leon was saying, I think there's a number of things you can read into it. There's a number of takeaways you can get from it. But yeah, it's unlike anything else I read last year.
With your engineering background, I could almost have put money on the fact that this would appeal to you.
I mean, none of you really sold it to me on that aspect. I happened to just pick it up because I heard how enthusiastic Leon was talking about this. And it really worked. I loved it. Good pick.
Yeah. I'm going to, I'm coming back round again for a second book from 2020 because I feel like I have to mention this one as well. So I think BOWIE is like top of my list. But then there was also this little book called The Department of Truth, which me and Leon both spoke about in episode 98, and like it was cool, it was timely, it was important, and it was a comment on the direction things have been going during 2020. What is truth? and how truth works. It was like a kind of anti-X-Files thing where it was like literally the anti-X-Files, like a reverse X-Files type thing. I think I even called it a reverse X-Files on the episode that, in fact, the episode that we talk about it might actually be called Reverse X-Files. I can't remember, but it really appealed to me on a level of it being something that, a story that needed to be told during 2020, and the way that it felt so important and timely, and the way that it ran, and we're now four issues in, and like it's just so necessary, like to kind of like I don't know, it's almost sad that something like this has to exist, or that something like this can exist. And I think I mentioned this before as well, for the fact that there is so much conspiracy bullshit out there that people believe and take as gospel truth, and it leads to dangerous thinking, and it ruins lives of everyone involved, and it ultimately leads to, like, well, you've only got to take what happened recently in the US, which, like, with the Capitol building, like, a lot of the people that were standing out there were fueled by fucked up conspiracy theories, and that's that's it. Like, a lot of the people that were standing there would have been fueled by this QAnon bullshit that's been going around and everything else. And it's the fact that people can take this and turn this into their truth and hold this as their truth, and they almost make their own world out of it. And what this comic does is it takes this and it holds a mirror up to it. It holds a mirror up to these kind of like the anti-truth, as it were, because it's not because at this point, when people believe it so vehemently, it's not a lie. And when it's so virulent, it's not a lie anymore. It's not a conspiracy. It's an anti-truth, isn't it? Because people take it as gospel and believe it and believe in it. And this what this comic did was it held a mirror up to that, and it was something that we needed. It was something to keep us grounded, and it makes a statement about how reality gets twisted, and how this information is propagated, and how easily this false information can fall into people's hands, and how easy it is for people to get sucked in, ordinary people falling down rabbit holes and ending up in this hall of mirrors, reflecting, you know, like your own, reflecting this stuff back at you, and twisting what you believe and twisting your perception of the world. And so the crux of this comic is the fact that if people believe it hard enough, it becomes real. That was the whole point in the story. And we have this government department called the Department of Truth, whose job it was to combat this by making sure that people understood that it was bullshit, basically. And to stop people from believing in it so hard, and to kind of put a stop to these conspiracy theories, or to stop them from getting out of hand, basically, to stop them from gaining too much of a foothold and too much power, to combat that. And it was like, it had like this real ethereal dream / nightmare like quality to the art, which kind of helps with this whole, like, you know, is it real? Is it manufactured by the mind thing that it has going on? It had this like real Dave McKean quality to the art, actually. Like, it's very reminiscent of Dave McKean's like Sandman covers, and you know, like the Arkham Asylum book, and like it just has like such an ethereal quality, and it's such an important tale, and it actually it has a lot of hope in there as well, because it keeps you grounded, and it makes you, you know, these people are out there fighting for the truth, and that's what was the cool thing about it. This whole department dedicated to making sure that people believe in what's real, to stop what's not real becoming real. and it had this whole supernatural edge, and it was just like the whole thing about it. And even 4 issues in now, I'm still like absolutely enamored by it, like page after page after page of this beautiful artwork, and the way that, you know, it deals with all these different like conspiracy theories and things like that. Like issue 3 is one of my favorites. That one deals with like the whole thing surrounding like school shootings in the US, and this whole thing with, you know, crisis actors and like the fact that some people out there believe that school shootings are like hoaxes put together by people that want to shut down the NRA and that kind of thing, like all along those kind of lines. Like, and it's quite, I mean, it's quite harrowing in the journey it takes you through, how it, like this woman whose son died in a school shooting, and how she even begins to believe in the anti-truth herself, that her son was a crisis actor and all of this, and that it was all staged. And she falls onto the wrong side of the internet, and then she starts to believe in this herself. And it's kind of like, this is what I mean by like how it illustrates this, and how these things ruin lives and things like that, and how we need to be aware of these things and how to avoid them. And I think this is a great comic for illustrating that, and it's a great concept for a comic book. And I just really did enjoy it, like the propagation of this whole comment on the propagation of false information, and all this beautiful artwork as well, all this beautiful like beautiful, gorgeous artwork, like littered throughout. So yeah, I mean, that is the Department of Truth, and that is written by James Tynan, artist here is Mark Simmons, lettered by Adi Chibidikar, designed by Dylan Todd, and edited by Steve Fox.
Yeah, that's a book that I do want to return to. I read the first 2 issues of you at the time, and the concept is really cool, and I pretty much echo everything you said in terms of that McKean quality. I love the coloring used in this book. I just love the sort of misty darkness that you have over the whole thing, and the way the general idea plays throughout those 2 issues is really good, and how you say it is reverse X-Files does just kind of nail it. It's a good use of like the metaphor through the form. I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, like I keep saying, it's sad that this has to exist, but then on the flip side, you've got, like, was it like last September, like I caught some news about an Italian couple trying to find the edge of the earth because they were flat earthers, and they broke quarantine rules to get in a boat to try and sail to an island that was on the edge of the earth or something like that.
Did they make it?
No.
They fell off the edge. Oh,
no, they got caught and they got brought back and made to observe quarantine. But like, they were that convinced that the earth was flat that they thought if they were going to sail on from where they were in Italy, there was this particular island that was the edge of the earth, or so they thought. This middle-aged Italian couple. It's just mind-boggling, isn't it? That like, and well, it's not. It's mind-boggling that you can fall down a hole and you can be in the Hall of Mirrors for so long that you become part of the Hall of Mirrors. In that way, knowing that there is a truth out there that you know to be true, like you have been taught for so long that the Earth is round. Like, you know the Earth's round. Like, deep down inside your soul, you know the Earth is round. You look at everything to know the Earth is round. And I just can't understand how any other evidence that's contrary to that can supersede that when it's so shaky in comparison. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, like, it goes to show that, like, yes, this stuff does happen and people do fall into these rabbit holes, and this book is necessary. Like, the whole thing of this book holding a mirror up to what's going on in the world is necessary because of things like that. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. That was my second 2020 book, and I could not mention that on this episode if we're talking about best books of last year, because it resonated me so hard. So, like, moving on from there, what we're going to do now is we're going to get into comfort books. So when I say comfort book, I mean a book that brought you comfort during what would have been like the deepest of lockdown last year, or the deepest of what was going on during the spring and summer of 2020. So my comfort books, quite surprising actually, because you wouldn't think the subject matter in the book would have been so comforting. But what I've gone for is Quarantine Comics, which was the Ice Cream Man team. Like basically when everything shut down, when the comics industry all but halted because deliveries weren't able to go ahead and things like that, and comic book shops weren't able to open, and new comics were just kind of like sitting in warehouses printed ready, that kind of thing. What the Ice Cream Man team did is they, in an effort to help during the crisis, is they put together these 2 to 4 page comics that they brought out like once or twice a week. And they sold them online as PDFs, and they sent a portion of the money to the Book Industry Charitable Foundation, which supported like local bookshops and comic book shops, which were hit really hard financially during like some of these closures and things, because obviously with things being as they were, but and as they are now in Britain at the moment, actually, because we're in our 3rd lockdown now, but as things were, like, we couldn't have shops open safely. So, and these comic book shops and things like that were hit particularly hard by that, because they obviously, it relies on people being able to go in and pick up their physical media. And yeah, so they did this to help, and these, like, to try and help the medium, in fact, to try and help comics in general. And these were like short tales by the ICM creative team, for the most part, with some guest creators also joining in. And they were actually a source of comfort for me in their effort to do something for the industry and help. It was nice to see something positive happening, and to see the cogs continually turning, and to have something to look forward to each week. It's like, oh, a new issue of Quarantine Comics this week. I get to look forward to that. You know, something to have, like, to kind of like to keep me going, to look forward to. And yeah, and like things had shut down, and these guys were still out there examining the human condition, still playing with humor and deep existential horror, and still expertly crafting tragedies, and still marching on. Some of it was like a slight change in tone, but all of it was much needed, and it was a comfort to have access to this. And they were great, and they ended up all collected in a physical issue that I managed to grab, which came out last September. And I'm still proud of the fact that I managed to get the foil thank you variant, because they only did one of those for each comic store, and I managed to get the one that was sent to my LCS, because I asked them to put it in my pull box. And I bought that, and like, it's something that I will hold on to for the rest of my life. Like, a lot of people bought these things, they buy these things because they just want to sell them on eBay and make as much money out of them as possible and things like that. But I feel like this is something special that I'm going to hold on to. Because these comics were like an important part of things that got me through 2020, I guess. And there was some great little stories. Like, we talked about a couple of them on the cast. We talked about Quarantine Comics #1, back in episode 85, which was the story of Will Shakespeare. It was like a juxtaposition of how people were. So there was this thing going around during the lockdown, this whole thing where people were like, oh, you've got all this time now to yourself. You should be ultra productive with all this time you've got to yourself during this crisis that's going on, you know, like, never mind your mental health, you should be ultra productive. I mean, think of William Shakespeare. He wrote during isolation. The bubonic plague, he lived through the bubonic plague, and he wrote some cool plays during that. So maybe if Will Shakespeare could do it back then, when, you know, it was like the 1500s or whatever, 1600s, like, maybe you can do it as well, like, you know. And no, the reality is, no, we're not all like that. We're not all that, you know. some of us, it was basically what this comic was. It was basically telling you it's okay to not be your best self and not be productive during that time. And it was a breath of air to see something like that out there. And I really commended it, and I was really into it. I was really into the idea of that, of using this as a positive, not only a positive force for the industry, but a positive force for anyone who might pick it up and read it. Like almost like one of those like short like tweets or things you see where it's like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but it's okay to spend tons of money on video games, because it is. I don't know who needs to hear this, but it's okay to spend tons of money on comics. I don't know who needs to hear this, but it's okay to not be your best self and super productive during a world crisis pandemic. It's okay. And I loved that. That's what I loved about it. And it was great. And then there was also this like witty retelling parody of the creation in the Garden of Eden and things, which was like a nice little bit of escapism that I needed. And the wisecracks and like little pops at modern society that they got in there, and how we live such dull, unfulfilling lives and everything else. So, like playing again with that existential dread, but doing it in a way that didn't fuck with me too much during the pandemic. And actually helped, which I was really into. So, yeah, I mean, you guys read these as well, right?
Yeah, well, no, I think I bought the first few. I can't remember if I caught up to the rest.
Yeah, there was an Animal Crossing one as well. Did you read any of these, Leon? I don't know.
No, I've not.
No.
I wanted to, and I wanted to catch up with the regular Ice Cream Man, but I just haven't got around to it.
I mean, these are all still totally available. Like you can still buy them, and they are all still like they're all 100% worth your time. So I totally recommend checking these out. And they were a great source of comfort to me during everything that was going on. So I have to put these down as my number one comfort book.
Yeah, they're a really good exercise in brevity as well. Like, I love short snippet stories. Some of them are really good. Like, just bite-sized things. Yeah.
Yeah, it gave me something to hang on to and hold on to, as well as, like, being able to grab comics digitally as well. Like, so when things were getting released, sometimes the release schedules remained, and although they weren't able to release comics physically, we were able to buy comics digitally still. And it was nice to have that weekly ritual still of being able to check the new releases for that week, which was something I've built up like over my life as a comics fan. Like that weekly ritual of being able to see what's new on the stands. And it was nice to be able to do that, even if I'm only doing that on my tablet in my house and going, oh, that looks good, I'll have that on Comixology or whatever. It was nice to be able to do that still, you know? And that during the fact that when the comic shops were closed and things, that was a source of comfort for me. Ray, you got a comfort book?
Aha, this is where I've got two. So suck it, Greg. So I don't know why I'm being so aggressive. My first one is my first comfort comic. But let me take a step back. BLOODBORNE was my lockdown game. That was my comfort game. It's the game that kept me in touch with a wide net of friends. It had an eldritch setting that I loved. It gave me meaningful yet, inconsequential goals, meaning that, it gave me something to work towards, something that I wanted to work towards, but if I failed, it didn't matter because it's just a game. It's not like I had to accomplish something in my real life that would have, resonating consequences or whatever. And it's a game that gave me comfort through mastery through repetition. Like, and this is a year, or 2020 was a year. See, we're all still talking about 2020 like it's still happening. 2020 was a year filled with meaningless repetition.
Right. It is still happening. We're on the 41st of December 2020. Right now, as we're recording this.
Why would you say that? Yeah, no, you're right though, because it feels endless. We're in the same situation, which means there's no delineation between one to the next. But
yeah.
It was and still is a time filled with meaningless repetition, right? In that wake up, work, go to bed kind of thing. And it was nice to... It was weird that I found comfort in a game that essentially replicates that same loop, but instead of the repetition being the same in and out. Like, there was a thing to be gained by doing that repetition. You learn through doing. You got better because you tried so many times and you tried so hard. And like I basically had a few things that gave me this, which were naan bread, curry, longboarding, Bloodborne. Right, those are the things that I repeated over and over and over till I got good at them. Maybe not longboarding yet, but there's a comfort in approaching something that's seemingly insurmountable and chipping away at it through practice and persistence and help from friends who have much more talent and experience than me. And so, while Bloodborne, the comic, is an extension of tragedies in a universe built on tragedies, the comfort came from revisiting these old haunts. And like, one thing that 2020 taught me is like, anything can feel comfortable, can feel like coming home if you give it enough time and instances. And yeah, so I found this horrifying book full of horrifying eldritch creatures really, really satisfying, because it felt like seeing more of my home that I spent, 100 hours in last year, whatever, 2020. So that's my first comfort book. That's written by Alice Cott, art by Piotr Kowalski, colours by Brad Simpson, letters by Aditya Bidikar, and that's published by Titan Comics. The second one is Watchmen, by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, as we all know. And in a very similar sense to... hang on, let me take a step back. I reread all of Watchmen in time for the podcast when we were supposed to be recording for the comic, the prequel comics, and then the TV show and the film. And unfortunately, I wasn't available to record with you guys, for various COVID reasons. But it was a joy to listen to you guys and ask you discussing the book in episode 83 back in March. And in a very similar sense to the Bloodborne comic, it felt like coming home, but on the opposite end. Whereas, like, I had to start as a noob and grow to mastery. Like, reading Watchmen felt like it is a text that I'm already quite intimately familiar with, but hadn't read in many years. So, like, diving back into it, and having meant to reread it years after having read it for the last time, because I'd recently watched and loved the 2019 Damon Lindelof HBO Watchmen series, it felt like slipping into a body temperature bath. Like, I didn't even notice it. Like, I know it so well in and out, but I don't know, I could revel at the bits that I knew I would enjoy, and I don't know, that was a comfort to me. And the fact that the podcast gave me a reason to do that, and it was at the very beginning of lockdown and everything, and like, I didn't know where it was going to lead to, but like, I felt like I got something from that at the time. So that's my second pick.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like, it is basically Watchmen at this point. The amount of times I've read it is a comfortable pair of sweatpants. Right, exactly.
So, it's that pair of sweatpants that you like. You'd never wear in company. You're ashamed that you still own it, but like, why would you ever get rid of it? Because they're still functional. They're still fine. They don't have holes in places where there shouldn't be holes. They just
exactly
slip back in. Yeah.
And it was a comforting thing because it's something familiar and everything else. So yeah, 100% for sure.
And the reason just to add one final point, the reason I pick these and I'm slightly surprised by them is because normally I feel like I'm the one who likes the very somewhat saccharine stories. I like the cutesy things. I like the ones that don't really have a lot of conflict in them. So for my comfort books to be two quite overtly violent stories came as a bit of a shock to me, but hopefully I've justified why.
Yeah, you're the sweet one, I'm the weird one.
Cool.
Leon, do you have a comfort book for us?
My comfort book is in a very similar vein to Rahul's first book. Early on in the year, I think it might have been at least one of the first 2 or 3 podcasts we recorded this 2020, is when we revisited the works of Junji Ito.
I looked at this when you put it on the sheet, and I'm like, how is any of that comforting? It's like the most anxiety-driven books.
Well, that's the thing. I'm never really been the type to like joyful or like sunny, cutesy stuff to be my safe space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more so if I'm feeling in a particular way, I watch or read or listen to something which gives off a similar vibe.
So, like, Rahul's the sweet one, I'm the weird one, and you're the wild card.
It's so weird to put it that way. But yeah, I found in prep for that episode, which was episode 80, I had done like a lot of research, a lot of planning, and obviously a lot of rereading of the books. And then we record the episode, and it was more as like a general chat about different elements of different Ito works. But post the episode, I found myself going back and rereading some of the ones I hadn't read for years, or checking out some of the newer short stories. And yeah, it's legit been like comfort food. But I think it's comfort food in the sense that you know what you're getting. And it's usually going to be something messed up. And I love the way Junji Ito approaches these things, because you can see like influences from all different types of horror and just life in general. But then the way how different things are brought together, the way how you have these recurring images, that these just messed up, you look at it and it sort of sticks in your head, and has so many of those going through the books that there's always one which like hooks its way into your brain and you're thinking about it, and then you start to think about other things that could happen in that scenario. So like, oh, imagine if this happened but in this way. And yeah, I find that reassuring. It's like going back to like a warm blanket, but this one is a messed up blanket with like fish with legs and spirals everywhere.
The weird kind of comedy to some of it as well, which
yes, there's very dark humor in there that I quite enjoy. And one of my favorite Junji Ito things is the facial expressions throughout for the different characters. It's like characters reacting to the most incredible things you can conceive in the most horrific circumstances, and the way they convey the true terror that they're experiencing in that moment always gets me, and I always enjoy reading it.
He's actually got another new book that I think has just come out this year, or I don't know. You'll have to tell me because you might know more than me. This might have been a reprint or something. It's called Remina or Remina.
I think that's a reprint.
Yeah, it's about a planet that comes from inside a wormhole, and then
But I've not read it.
The planet is a hell star or something, and it's coming towards Earth, and it's eliminating planets and stars one after the other until finally it gets to Earth, and Earth faces extinction.
That sounds amazing.
It's like somewhere between Galactus and possibly that moon thing that has a face, the Ganon-faced moon in Majora's Mask. I don't know. Like I'm looking at this now, and like I really want. I thought this was new because I'd never seen this before, but like it's not on. I couldn't find it digitally anywhere. And oh no, it is on Kindle and Comixology. I lie, but it's like recently added, so it's like I thought this was new.
It might be like new to the.
Yeah, I think it was originally published in 2005, from what I can find.
Yeah, because this is 7th of January 2021, according to this,
because
for the publishing
I think
of this
that's
edition.
One of the ones that hadn't been published internationally previously.
Yeah.
and had only been like fan translations.
Totally want to check that out though.
I mean,
That's on my
Leon,
list.
though, to your point earlier, like, I kind of see where you're coming from. I think, in terms of why this is satisfying, because I think for comics, I am the saccharine one. But in movies and stuff, I do find a lot of comfort in, like, the classic horror films or, you know, that kind of gory stuff. There's something satisfying that I want to return to in that. And I think the best way I can think of, like, putting Junji Ito in that bracket is, like, his books are satisfying in the way that a giant bucket of KFC is satisfying. You know what I mean? Like, they're all greasy and horrifying, and then when you're in the middle of it, you're in a trance, and then when it's over, you look back into the bucket and see the carcass, and you're horrified. Like, it's... I get it. Like, it's a disgustingly delicious meal, and why wouldn't you want to go back to that occasionally?
I think it's the lines and the art, like, for me, with the Junji Ito books. Like, I can see comfort in the fact that they're so surreal. And it's the, like, in the way that he draws, like, the lines. Like, I mean, like, some of his books, like, especially, like, Gyo, like, are so weird and surreal, and Gyo has, like, this real, like, line of humor running through it. And that I can, you know, I fully say, yes, that is a comforting book. Like, it can be a comforting book because it's hilarious, and it keeps you going, and you go chapter to chapter to chapter, and there's enough of it as well. It's satisfying size wise, like, it's a good portion. So yeah, maybe it is a bucket of KFC. I mean, yeah, I'm vegetarian now, so I don't do that anymore, but yeah.
Well, I do like how all of our comfort books are horrific.
Yeah.
It's been that kind of year, man.
Yeah, it really does paint a good picture.
I got one more that I wanted to shout out for comfort books, because it was comforting for me in a different way, because it wasn't horrific. This was the TMNT ongoing book. Now, like, this is, like, post the fallout of the events of issue 100. So this is like issue 101 onwards, like, from last year, that I was finding comforting during what was going on. And the reason I was finding it comforting during what was going on is because the characters in the TMNT universe were largely going through a similar experience. So, like, in the fallout for the events of 100 and like, in tying up loose ends for things that led up to that point, like, there was a new creative team from issue 101 onwards. When I say creative team, I mean one woman. I mean Sophie Campbell. It was like a beautiful, it's like, it became like she took over, like, main writing and art duties, and it became this, like, fantastic one woman show. And like, it's this whole concept that she introduced of Mutant Town, like, after the bomb. Like, so sidebar kind of thing, like, there's this this whole TMNT RPG, which is like a pen and paper RPG, arcane thing, whatever, that you can play, that is based around a mutagen bomb going off, and, like, all the different mutations that result from that, different factions of mutants and things like that. And I think what they have done is what Sophie Campbell has done is taken that and adapted ideas from that, with the whole Mutant Town thing and the whole post-mutagen bomb thing, into the TMNT canon, and brought us what we are seeing now with these mutants living, you know, like, living with their mutations. So obviously not every mutant was a human. Some of them were animals that then got more that got smarter and more anthropomorphic, i.e. the TMNT. They started off as small turtles. But, like, some people were humans and then became, they took on animal traits after the mutagen bomb. And these people obviously struggling to deal with that, and they've set up, like, little support groups in Mutant Town and things like that. And, like, it's just how this mutant, like, how they're picking up the pieces during this crisis, and how they help to form a society, and they help others that are dealing with the change, because they have been completely forsaken by everything outside of Mutant Town. Like, the mayor of the city, who is at this point Baxter Stockman, is largely ignoring what's going on while also monitoring what's going on like it's some little experiment. So he's got cameras set up and stuff like that, or he's like spying on them, and like it's how they're getting goods in from the outside and things like that, and how they are the focus here is on like positive steps towards a better future. And it's gone less about them like at war and more about them trying to help in the community at war with other issues instead of being like physically at war. They set up like a dojo, which is like a positive way to keep kids off the street and keep people occupied and train people. They set up a dojo. They're like training people in martial arts. They are like doing things to help. Mikey set up a podcast about living in Mutant Town to try and get like news out to people and to try and like get people involved and things like that. They're going to do an election for mayor of Mutant Town. That's upcoming now. That's like the latest thing that they're on now, because it turns out we've got different views as to how we would deal with mutation, and some people are happy with it, some people aren't. Some people like the mutanimals, who are like kind of ruling with a little bit of an iron fist, but they're not so efficient at it, because obviously whatever they're doing doesn't seem to affect what's going on with the turtles and things like that as a separate faction. So you've got the mutanimals, which are a group of kind of militant mutants, like mutants for mutants type thing. I don't want to say mutant supremacist, but they're edging that way. And they kind of like are running the town one way with their enforcers and stuff, and some people are into that. Some people are like, yes, I like the mutanimals. They gave me a purpose, they gave me a home, they gave me food, etc. And then you've got the other side of that thinking, no, the mutanimals are brutes and they're just beating us all down for no reason and things like that. And it's so they're doing this whole thing with this election, and like just this focus on positive steps to create a better future for the mutants. And it's very slice of lifey at this point. Like Donatello is wearing dungarees and fixing water leaks and people's Wi-Fi and things like that. It's great. And it was good to see the guys doing good things, and it was light and it's fun and it's helped me. It's comforting to see them live, like, you know, to do this and to live through a crisis in that way and helping each other and holding each other up in that way. And I really enjoyed that, and it was precisely what I needed last year. So hats off to Sophie Campbell and all her excellent work on the new TMNT. Because I mean, like I'd have a bad thing to say about a Turtles comic anyway, but like I gotta say I love what she is doing right now. So yeah, that's my second comfort book. And I couldn't let you get away without mentioning that one. So I guess we're on to discoveries now. So discoveries, like I mentioned up top at the beginning of the episode, a book that you discovered during 2020. So it doesn't necessarily it can be a 2020 book, but like most part it doesn't have to be a 2020 book. I mean, like the ones I've chosen are from 2019. So my pleasant surprises and discoveries. I'm going to open this with Superman Smashes the Klan, which was we mentioned this in Ace Comicals episode 90, and this was a 2019 book, and this was the reason I loved this so much is because it was a slice of comics history, and I missed this in 2019 when it was originally released, and then I found it in 2020 last year when I was looking for things to read, and I wouldn't usually pick up a Superman story. Like Superman wouldn't normally be my go-to. I'm not huge on Superman stories a lot of the time, but for some reason this really appealed to me. I think it was the Smashes the Klan bit, as in the Ku Klux Klan. So it was basically based on a 1940s radio show, The Adventures of Superman. It was based on a storyline they ran called The Clan of the Fiery Cross in this 1940s radio show. And this was like the help. They ran this story with the help of the ADL and Stetson Kennedy, who was like a really prominent anti-Klan reporter, and they put together this 16-part story, and it basically was there as a kind of like a shots fired at the KKK. It trivialized the rituals and practices of the Klan. It made them look stupid. It made them look dumb. It was out to kind of like, it was out to caricaturize them and make them look stupid, to kind of like stop, to make people stop and think, and to change people's minds about things, and to basically point people to the fact that because the Ku Klux Klan would have been on the rise again at that point, and this was a way for them to strike out of the Ku Klux Klan and to remind people about how just fucking dumb all that shit is, basically, and how bad all of it is the easiest way to explain it. And now we have this graphic novel, this adaptation of it, and it was super powerful. When I read it, it was great. It has this beautiful, clean, bold artwork. It looks so bright. The colors are gorgeous. Some fantastic character designs. Like, I would love DC animated features in the style of this book. I said this at the time when we recorded the episode, and I'm saying it again now. Like, I want DC to do animated features in the style of this book, 'cause it's great. I want this book as an animated feature. I think it would make a fantastic animated feature. And I would love that. Like, honestly, it's set during the Golden Age. It's like Superman. It's like Golden Age Supes, and the whole message in there and everything. It's just a beautiful book, and it was what I needed to read at the time, and it was what I needed to see. Like, some positivity right there. Like, I discovered this in the midst of all the Black Lives Matter protests and everything that was happening during the summer of 2020. And yeah, it was a powerful graphic novel, and I'm glad I read it, and I would recommend it to anyone. And I'm sad that I missed out on this the first time round in 2019. So yeah, there we go. Brilliant book. And like taught me something as well, because it gave me like a leaping point for like this research that I did, because I love losing myself in stuff like that, like doing this like deep research into things, like and like it gave me a leaping off point for all this like reading, like late night reading I did about like this 1940s Superman radio show, and even listening to some of it, because I found a lot of it on YouTube. Yeah. And I even put a link with the episode notes for episode 90. There is a link to a YouTube playlist that has the whole 16 episodes for the Clan of the Fiery Cross, if you wanted to go back and listen to that. So yeah, I'll give you some credits for that as well. So that was Superman Smashes the Klan. If you want the credits, that was written by Jean Luen Yang. Art was Gurihiru, which is a team of Chifuyu Sasaki and Naoko Kawano, who are like Chifuyu Sasaki was pencils and inks, and Naoko does colors. Lettering by Janice Chang, and published by DC Comics. So, Leon, where are we with you for your discoveries?
So my discoveries are also older books, and in particular they are two that we spoke about on this very podcast. The first one we spoke about in episode 91, and that was Ghetto Brother, Warrior to Peacemaker, which came out back in 2014. And that was the book written by Julian Village and Claudia Aring. And this was the book about the true story of a former gang member, Benji Melendez, who basically sought to replace the violence in gangs, and instead create a coalition to focus on peace over violence, and was successful in initiating a gang truce up in New York. And what I really enjoyed about this book is it like shone a light on an area of history that I was less informed on, but also is presented in a way that gets you like right there, right in the midst of it. And its artwork style is this almost chalky, but like highly like pencil-y type of art, and it gives you a mix of like detail, but also like I don't know, like a film of haze on it as well, and at times almost feels like you're not really on an odyssey, but as you're skipping through time with this person and we're going to these different events in time, it's almost dizzying at times to see what this was like, and what it, how the systems are set up to make doing what Melendez did such an amazing thing. And I think what it's super successful at doing is adding a dimension to the people and the neighborhoods. This was like Bronx, to show how like a collection of people, mostly people of color, mostly the children of immigrants, and this is like decades back in like the 60s and 70s, how the world looked and how the outside looked to people, and in terms of what their relationship was with, say, the government or like policing. And it's a lot of stuff that's obviously very relevant to today, and felt even more relevant last summer. But like it's such hard to describe, but I would say in a way it's an inviting look into this world and this area, and it doesn't feel like a whitewashed like rendition of these events and this time in history, but instead it does feel quite raw, and at times sad, but very hopeful elsewhere. It's a book I'd highly recommend, because when I talk about like loving graphic novels, like this is what I'm talking about, where you have a bit of beginning, middle of, and an end here, and it's just a solid story that you'll find interesting but also revealing in other ways.
I think this was kind of like a theme for us last year at Ace Comicals as well, because we kind of picked a lot of these kind of like true story semi-biographical things to talk about, didn't we? There's a few that we did Redbone, we did this, BOWIE, which I mentioned up top, but we had a lot of these kind of like non-fiction graphic novels going on, which I don't know if that was the year, or if that was just, I don't know what was pushing that to the forefront of things that we were picking to talk about, but I enjoyed it, and I actually actively seek this stuff out now, like, because I think that for me, because I enjoy history and things like that as well, and I enjoy looking into these these parts of history that often get overshadowed or don't get taught at school, or don't get, like, things that people should know but don't know because of the way that our education system is geared up and works. And sadly, the institutionalized racism that is part of that. And I enjoy like getting to learn about these things in events and getting to learn about this stuff. And I enjoy going back and looking at it. And I think these graphic novels provide a great leaping off point for me, because I can read something like this and then I can spend hours looking for more information and things like that, which is really cool. And I think they're a really cool educational tool. I think they should have more of this sort of stuff in schools.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, agreed.
Definitely. So yeah, I think I'm going to go back round and I'm going to give you another discovery of mine from last year, just briefly, which is a book called Red Mother, which I had to mention this. This had to be mentioned as a discovery of mine, because I think, Ray, you initially had this on your list, didn't you? And then you changed it.
I did, because I kind of re-reflected on it, and I think because I hadn't finished it, and some of the criticisms I had with it feeling quite drawn out and very comic book in the sense that like I wanted it to be a complete graphic novel, I took it back off and realized I had something more appropriate. But it's definitely a good comic, and I'd be keen to see why you consider it your best discovery.
I think it's my best discovery because it was like one of the best horror books I read last year, and because I in this book I am a fan of the slow burn, and I love the kind of like the slow build and this whole inevitable kind of like march towards doom that this whole thing has going on, and how everything is orchestrated and preordained and put into place like a puzzle, because puzzles are at the center of this book. And just how it has this like cosmic horror thing going on, which I love, like cults, cosmic horror, things like that. Like it's a big theme in a lot of the music I listen to. It's just, I don't know why I find it fascinating. I just do. Like this kind of like occult type thing, and it has this like occult mood about it, and this these occult leanings, this cosmic horror type stuff going on.
It has a very like Wicker Man and Hereditary sort of thing going on with it.
Yeah. And it's this this woman whose her career is basically in creating intricate, I want to say esoteric puzzles, and she experiences a traumatic event, very traumatic. She's attacked in the street. Her boyfriend is dragged off and presumed dead, and she loses an eye during the attack, and like the first issue or so deals with how she comes to terms with that and the healing process and everything else, and then all the while in the back of it there's something a little bit strange going on, and like as you go through issue by issue, the strangeness becomes more the strangeness, the eldritch horror and everything else gets more and more towards the forefront. This kind of like weird cosmic horror, this occult kind of like these occult leanings and whatever become more and more like everything starts to bend and warp more and more as you get further in, and you just can't help yourself but go down that spiral staircase. And I think I was initially glad that I had a bunch of this to read all at once, because I don't think I could have stood having it issue by issue, week by week. I think that would have killed me. But yeah, it's a great little book, and it's a great slow burn. It has some really gorgeous artwork, some great detail, some great character design, like, and it's just like fantastic start to finish. Like as far as I am 11 issues in, and I love every second of it. And that is The Red Mother, and that is created by Jeremy Horn, written by Jeremy Horn, illustrated by Danny Luckett, and lettered by Ed Dukeshire. And it's just a gorgeous book, and it just has everything that I look for in a good horror comic, and I think it was one of my better discoveries of last year. And when I pick it as one of my better discoveries, it's like, how did I miss this the first time round? Because this is like, this screams at me as something that I would be into. And somehow this passed me by. Like, I follow Jeremy Hown on Twitter. I've read his other work. I've been reading The Realm, which is another book that Jeremy Hown has worked on. And somehow, some way, this drifted by me when it was originally released, and I had to pick it up last year instead. But there we go. Ray, your discovery, please.
Yeah, so my discovery of 2020 is a 2020 book, and it's Don't Go Without Me by Rosemary Valero O'Connell, published by Shortbox and also available on PDF via Gumroad, I believe. And it's literally one of the last discoveries I was able to make in the real world. Like, it's the last graphic novel I bought in a brick and mortar shop. Shout out to Gosh Comics in London. Hope they're doing okay. I don't know what their situation is, but, fingers crossed for them. And yeah, so I feel like it's a double up sort of pick, because not only is it an incredible book, but and maybe I'm being too romantic about it, but like, it does have this place in my head and in my heart, being like one of the last things that I saw on a shelf and thought, oh, what is this? I'll just get it because it looks cool. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I picked it up in Gosh Comics, and I was waiting for my girlfriend to do a cat sitting job somewhere in Farringdon. So and I never do this. I never pick up a book and then go to a cafe and read that book after I bought it. But I got to do that with this one, this last remnant of the real world.
Totally can't do that. Totally can't do that anymore.
100%. And I never really did it anyway. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's a weird synchronicity or something.
I've done that hipster thing. I've bought comics, and then I've gone and sat in the pub and made notes on comics in the pub with a pint in front of me, looking all important, like I'm like, I've sat there making my notes for this show in the pub before, and like reading comics and like making notes and whatever, and then getting into like semi-merry conversations with the bar staff that I know about it. Like, oh yeah, like I think it was when we covered Obscura last year. And I remember spending a whole night in there talking. I was waiting for Sophie to finish work, and I remember spending a whole night in the bar talking to some of the bar staff that I know about Victorian death photography. Like, because of like, yeah, these are the rabbit holes I fall into. But yeah, anyway, like I used to love doing stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and more power to you, because like I'm not saying this with any sense of shame or judgment or whatever. Like I'm questioning to myself, like, why didn't I do this more often? Like, it was such a nice experience, and I'm so glad that I had it before, any of us knew any of this shit was going to go down. But, like, yeah, I was sat in a cafe reading this cover to cover, and, like, it's a self-described as a triptych collection of stories on love, loss, longing, and connection. And I previously talked about this back on episode 82, but... So I don't want to rehash too much about what I loved about it, because I think I expressed that relatively well back then. But in reflecting on it for this episode, I do want to speak on the things it evokes in me now, because I reread it yesterday just to, remind myself what it was, because it's quite an abstract piece, and it's actually 3 stories rolled into one book. But firstly, it's absolutely beautiful. Like, it flows like a dream. The line art and the panel construction work in absolute harmony. It lets you luxuriate in like florid, swirling, richly dense pages, lulls you into its soft romantic swells, and then trips you up by shifting the template or the reading layout or the perspective or the actors in the scene. And it uses a very deliberate and consciously limited color palette for each story to really incredible effect, like finding so many ways to allow each color to evoke a different thing, or a wide array of tones. And it presents a very diverse spectrum of bodies, skin tones, hairstyles, languages, modes of speech, modes of thought, relationships and such, and that it covers it all in such a short time. Like, it's so impressive how it gets to cram all of that into this one package. And it's become because I'm the one who keeps bringing up like how it made me feel in the context of lockdown. Like it's become really difficult not to relate all these stories somehow to the time that we're currently living through. And I don't want to be too prescriptive because all of these stories are dense enough to have multiple varying touch points and could be read into in various different ways. But I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can, one by one, and just some of the comments that I've got on how it makes me feel now relative to what I would have said back in episode 82. So story number 1 is called Don't Go Without Me, which is also the name of the title of the book. And the primary colours are white, brown, peach and black. And one of the opening lines is, "Worlds syncing up and diverging, but never touching." Which is atop a description of hands intertwined but like separated in panes with like jumbled shards of glass. And if that isn't a 2020 sentiment, then I don't know what is. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There are, and in some ways, like what I mean about it having lots of different touch points. Like one of the things I thought was the book is filled with these ravenous little creatures who are hungry and nothing fills their bellies like stories. That's how I feel as like a consumer of media this year. Like I need something to do. I need something to occupy me with. I just like fill me up with your stories, right? And then there's a part where the lead character is giving a really like descriptive, like explaining the minutiae of someone that they love but are distanced from, and like the slow inevitable shearing slippage of all the layers of that detail as the more she expresses it, the more she loses grip of it. Like that feels like a very 2020 social distancing thing. Wandering through an unfamiliar land lost in the throng of people and sights, and like the mixing of organic and architectural life, which I'm really missing. Like I have been missing for, almost a year now. Like that's a very quarantine sentiment. And then moving on to story 2, called What Is Left, and the primary colours are white, fuchsia, sort of navy blues and lilacs, and it's about living through someone else's memories, played back like recordings and snippets, and having memory be a kind of mechanical fuel, and the somewhat perverse, like vicarious living through these stories because you're trapped alone in the heart of a dying machine. Very 2020, being lost and hoping to be found, and this like delicious romantic otherworldly loneliness, very 2020. And the final story called Contemor Contenora, sorry if I butchered that, but it means with fear, with tenderness, is formed of a combination of the above colours with this additional muted minty green. And like it's all around, or at least the way I read into it, was the myths that form around the remains of a grand event. In this case, manifest as a literal giant sitting in the ocean. And it's a story about like pondering the consequences, the attempts to derive meaning in poetry and, attribution or not to something that affected all of us on a global scale. How this will all appear in distant retrospect, and the predictions we can make about our next steps, going through it and looking back. And, while we contemplate all of this, how do we choose to act? And do we choose to celebrate or despair or take action? And like, I don't know, I feel like this whole book was very prescient that way without knowing that it was going to be, because like, I don't know. I like that it doesn't have any answers, because how could these stories have any answers? But I really love these kind of stories which present a glut of ideas, and that's what this book has in spades. Like just so many ideas to contemplate about the life we're living right now, and it's like I'm trying to think of a way to express it. Like it's handing you a basket of like swollen grapes of inspiration to be thrown at the desperate cactus of our minds to see what penetrates and sticks. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this should have been my book of 2020 as well. Like,
you've just said that, and now because I've been watching an awful lot of Taskmaster recently, I'm imagining Greg Davies telling me to throw grapes at a cactus.
What is it about Taskmaster that's a really perfect lockdown show? Because me and Anna binged all of it over the course of
I don't know,
the last few weeks.
It's got some of my favourite comedians on it for a start. I mean, I love James Acaster. But like, it's just I've been watching like. Well, I think Sophie might actually be watching it at this very moment while we're recording. But yeah, we've been binging Taskmaster. Now,
I mean, I think it's almost like the video game things I said further up, where it's like it's fun just watching people do meaningless tasks because you got to occupy yourself somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a good show.
It is.
It's a good show. But yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed this book. I really hope people go out and pick it up. I really love Shortbox as well, and that's the same publisher for the book Leon mentioned, which was what was it? Beneath the Dead Oak Tree. They put out some amazing stuff, and yeah, that would be my pick. Go and read that. You might find some value in it.
Throw grapes
you will
at
find
this
some
cactus.
value in it. Yeah, throw grapes at some cacti. Yeah.
Throw grapes at this cactus. The most grapes stuck to the cactus at the end of the time limit wins. Leon, did you have another Discovery book that you wanted to bring up?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Did I spoiler that one? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It could have been a good segue. But yeah, I like jumping off what you were saying about Shortbox. I think it was in April last year, with the pandemic hitting in a bunch of big countries. I think they wanted to put some goodness into the world, so they started putting up a bunch of comics free, on different weeks. And the first one they did was Beneath the Oak Tree by Emily Carroll. And on this very podcast, I've spoken about Emily Carroll's When I Arrived at the Castle, which is a book that I had a lot of love for and enjoyed. And it was interesting to go back to a book that she had done the year before that one, and to see how similar but also different her style is between the two books. And a brief summary of Beneath the Dead Oak Tree is that a sort of female-looking character sees a male-looking character who is pretty much the dude who's running this big soiree, murder someone, and then instead of being terrified by this character is now interested in this, and it over the course of its say 30 or so pages explores a lot of this stuff, and it goes beneath the surface in terms of what you expectation, but also an inner, I guess we all have our inner beast inside us waiting to come out. And I think the thing I really love about Emily Carroll books is obviously the art, which is really cool, and I do like how it sort of breaks with form in a way, and you have these really cool pages split up and segmented in sort of non-standard ways. Yeah, you get your 9-panel pages from time to time, but then you also get things where dramatic action happens on top, laying on top of the panels, and we get staircase panels, and we get all sorts, whatever fits what's trying to be conveyed on each page is what is implemented, and it's always done really well. And I think I just really like how these books march to their own drummer, and when you reread, there's always a new detail as you're finding. I think I said before about When I Arrived at the Castle that it felt like reading a graphic poem, and I would definitely say that Beneath the Dead Oak Tree has that same sort of feel. It's hard because in some ways I just want to be and when this bit happens, when this bit happens. But I mean, ultimately, like I said on the previous episode, read this book. I think one thing that you can tend to get with, say, comic books or just like the sort of not online culture of it all is people exploring different types of books and having like your certain preferences, and whether that is reading the big two and keeping up with all the superhero comics, or whether it's checking out the like creator owned books on in places like Image and such, and or whether it's like graphic novels or like autobiography type ones. But I always think it's good to, like, even then, step outside of the bubble and pick something up just because it looks interesting, or just because it sort of speaks to you on a different level. And I always think it's good to shake it up, because I mean, I have a quite eclectic like taste for different things, but I would have said in general that I don't think, like, just on look, that this would be the book for me. This like years back, so it's nice to be at a place where I'm like eagerly anticipating something that I may not have engaged with maybe 5-10 years ago. So I mean, my ramble is just to make sure that you always keep an open mind with comics, because especially with comics, it's such an exciting medium, and there's always something really interesting to get involved in. And I think you're like spoiled for choice in terms of the diverse amount of art and content you can engage with. So definitely 2021, check something out that is definitely not in your wheelhouse, that is outside of your comfort zone, because you may be pleasantly surprised.
If there's anything I've learned over my time, like getting deeper into comics and doing this cast, it's like that there is no such thing as it's not in your wheelhouse, because there's something for everyone in everything. Like, you will find, like, it, I mean, like, you will. I don't think there's such a thing as this, as something that wouldn't necessarily appeal to you, because there's always going to be, you will always find something to love inside that somewhere, and you shouldn't ever dismiss things based on the fact that they don't look like something that you would initially gel with. And what I'm trying to say is, don't judge a book by its cover.
But then, yeah, I mean, sometimes if the cover's really good, buy it because the cover's really good.
Yeah, if the cover's like totally rad, then yeah, totally judge it by its cover and buy it. But, you know, otherwise, don't judge a book by its cover. Is the short way of saying that.
It's also partly like reassess what's valuable to you, because it's kind of like what you were saying, Greg, with the why has this year for us been so full of biographies or, like, you know, non-fiction works. And like, this is an argument that I used to have with my dad when I was 18, and I'm so glad he doesn't listen to the podcast, because he's 100% right, but, you know, I don't want him to hear that. But like, he would read a lot of non-fiction, and I was like, no, I love fiction, like, I want to read stories about sci-fi and fantasy. I'm like, obviously I'm a dumb kid and it's a reductive argument to begin with, but the point is, I've got to a certain age where now I do find a lot of value in non-fiction, and especially well-written non-fiction that teaches me about, you know, history and you know, all the stuff you were saying, basically. And it's the same thing with any sort of medium, and the same with these comics, where you might find in your 30s compared to your 20s, you have more of a touch point with poetic works, whereas before you didn't. So, like, it's always worth going back and just trying it again.
Yeah, I mean, you also might find that because you're now 30, insurance companies and you know, various other things that you used to associate with your parents and adults are being targeting their advertising at you now. Like, there's a Direct Line home insurance advert that uses Donatello from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I'm not gonna lie, it's sort of working. Because I'm now thinking, ooh, you know, maybe I should check out what Direct Line offer home insurance wise. Because I'm an adult now and I have to do that sort of thing. So Ugh. But yeah, it's weird. Like, this surreal world where, like, they're aiming this stuff at the forever children now. And it's like...
It's funny, because I remember a while ago they were doing, like, insurance adverts for the Jetsons and whatever. And, like, they've definitely done the generational shift. If they've gone from the Jetsons to the Flintstones to, like, TMNT, now they're targeting the mid-30-year-olds.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's... And, like, there was another advert about, like, mortgage, an app that helps you with your mortgage or whatever. And it was, like, this really well-animated advert of this guy in hell having his entrails pulled out by disembodied green hands and stuff. And I was like, this is so rad. What? And then I found out it was a mortgage advert.
That's wild. I haven't seen that.
If I find it again, I will share it with you. But yeah, it's so surreal having this, and you just brought all this up in my mind when you started talking about being 30. But yeah, so surreal.
Sorry to remind you.
Having all this stuff aimed at me when I used to, like, associate it with, like, Welsh opera singers and, like, my mum and dad. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, I think that wraps us up for 2020. So that was Ace Comicals in 2020, I guess. That was like that was a rundown of what we considered to be the best of 2020. So what I would now urge you to do is go to various comic outlets and buy these books if it's safe to go buy them physically, which in the UK currently it is not. Everything is closed. Stay at home because it's dangerous. But, like, obviously a lot of these are available digitally as well, so just go hit up your favorite digital store and grab them that way. What I want to do now is, like, I wanted to just sort of, like, look ahead into what we have coming out this year, because it is January now, and it's January 2021, and there is a slew of things to look forward to this year, comics wise. I've picked a couple. I don't know, do you guys have anything you're particularly looking forward to this year? Anything caught your eye, news wise, whatever?
No, my whole derail topic at the very start of this episode was to avoid this section. I haven't looked forward at all. I have no idea what's coming out this year.
Leon,
has anything caught your eye at all?
No. You know, this is not how the show works, Greg. I skate forward, and then I'm like, oh crap, that's coming out, cool. And then you recommend some stuff, and then I see something else that's cool, and then Rahul recommends something.
Well, anyways, I picked out a couple of things that I'm really looking forward to this year. So you will not be surprised to know that I'm looking forward to a new Swamp Thing series that comes this March from DC Comics, which is written by Ram V, which...
Oh, cool.
Is an absolute pleasure to say. Ram V writing one of my favourite characters, Swamp Thing. Like, I am really, really into the idea of that. So he's doing the Swamp Thing series. He's got Mike Perkins on art. He's got Adichie Bidikar on letters as well. So it's looking pretty hot. I'm, like, totally into this. And it comes hot on the heels of the DC Future State thing that's going on, which is something else I've not had a chance to get into and read yet, but that's another 2021 thing I was looking forward to. This ambitious look at the future of the DC universe. Like, within like this event they're running, this DC Future State event, which is, like, all post Dark Knight's Metal and everything else. We've also got this book coming out called Two Moons, which is an Image Comics book, and this is going to be an ongoing horror series by John Arcudi and rising star Valerio Giangiordano, and it's this, like, journey of a Pawnee man named Virgil Morris, aka Two Moons, fighting for the Union during the Civil War when he's suddenly confronted with his shamanistic roots, He discovers horrors far worse than the combat as the ghosts of his past reveal the monstrous evil around him. So I am totally looking forward to getting to check that out, and that is going to come out in February. Man-Bat is getting his own series, so that's Man-Bat, the Batman villain. So no, Man-Bat. He's the one that's a big bat. He's like a werewolf, but he's a bat. Like, yeah. If you want a good introduction to who Man-Bat is and what Man-Bat is, then go away and watch the episode of Batman the Animated Series called On Leather Wings. So yes, for years Kirk Langstrom has struggled with his monstrous alter ego Man-Bat and the serum that transformed him, but he's finally hit rock bottom following a devastating setback, and he's going to take his anger out on every single citizen of Gotham City. Will the combined might of Batman and the GCPD be enough to stop Langstrom once and for all, or will this just be the start of Man-Bat's devastation? And the cool thing about this is, I assume it's going to be from Man-Bat's point of view. So it's not a Batman story, it's a Man-Bat story. And we get to see Batman beating Man-Bat through the eyes of Man-Bat. So, go figure. But I am interested in that. Yeah, I mean, that amongst a lot of other things. Those are just three. But, like, there's a bunch of other stuff coming out. There's a sort of like a speaking of, like, we've been talking about, autobiographical type stuff in non-fiction comics. We've got this, a book about Steve Ditko. Which is called Ditko Shrugged instead of Atlas Shrugged. It's a book that seeks to shed more light on the life of Ditko and what shaped him and everything else. And we have this kind of like this non-fiction graphic novel coming up about the life and times of Steve Ditko, which I'm quite interested in checking out. So that's another one. There's a lot of Batman books. It's going to be which is something we were talking about like prior to the beginning of this cast, which is this really interesting looking clown book, which is by the writer of the Ice Cream Man comics, which is W. Maxwell Prince. And what he's doing is he's taking basically everything that makes Ice Cream Man good, and he's making an anthology series about clowns. Which I am totally 100% on board with. Like, I fill a bath with it. I want to dissolve and be washed down the plug hole.
I'll read that just because of the creators.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks fantastic. It's got this there's this cover art for it that just looks I think this is like the cover for issue 1. It looks insanely creepy. It's this clown, and it's done in this kind of like painted way. Like when you see these like, there's this painting that you used to see a lot, which was like a clown riding the earth like a space hopper, is the best way I can describe it. It's like a clown sitting on the earth. Like, my grandma used to have that painting in her house. It was in my aunt's bedroom.
What?
Yeah.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, and I remember just like seeing this in various places, in various forms, a clown sitting on planet Earth. And if I ever manage to dig it up again, guys, I will share it with you. But it's just like, it's painted in the style of these creepy clown paintings that people just used to have in their houses. Like, I don't know why. Maybe they were part of some weird secret society or something. But, like, my grandma's not in a cult. But,
I think I may have found it, by the way, by Robert Owen, if you want to Google it. But listeners out there, for your own edification. Yeah,
but it's kind of reminds me of that. But it has, like, this real sinister air to it because there's a lot of shadow going on. And this clown is just pulling this never-ending stream of handkerchiefs out of his mouth. And there's just something weirdly like off kilter and twisted and like strange about it that speaks to me on an unknown level. It's like there's episodes of was it an episode of Dexter's Lab where he gets told a joke and then he turns into a clown? He has nightmares about the joke. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. And the joke just keeps resonating in his head over and over again.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar.
In the end, he's like sweating away, and it's like this whole like this like children's psychological thriller, which is an episode of Dexter's Lab where he turns into a clown because of this one joke, this joke that's like a virus that like gets into his head. And holy shit, I've just realised Dexter's Lab was trying to teach me about memes. But there we go. If it was Dexter's Lab, I might be entirely wrong, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, that's what sets me off about
Dexter.
that.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, I don't know. It just in my head, like, why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. And it just echoes in his head in that voice over and over again. And it's this repetitive thing that it does, like the Omelette du Fromage episode as well. And it's great. Oh, Dexter, the unsung genius of Dexter's Lab. But yeah, another time for that. So I think that wraps us up. So yeah, so that's some things to look forward to in 2021. We have no pull list this week. But yeah, so we will close you out. So this has been the first episode of Ace Comicals in 2021, and that is Ace Comicals 103. You can find us in all the usual places, www.acecomicals.com, which is a hub for everything we do. You can listen to us everywhere, your favourite podcatcher. Just go find us, download it, listen to it, enjoy it. We are on Twitter under at Ace Comicals, where you can get involved in the conversation, at us, DM us, anything that we've spoken about today. If you've picked any of it up and read it, if you have opinions, if you want to tell us your books of 2020 using the same format, if you want to give us your comfort book, your discovery, and your 2020 book, get in touch and you know, have that conversation with us, because we want to talk about comics. That's why we do this podcast. So we're out to talk to you about comic books. Another thing as well, I did post on Twitter that because of what's going on in the UK at the moment, it's a pretty rough time for a lot of people, and what I'm doing is well, if anyone's interested, I'm going to put together some care packages of comics if anyone wants one. I've got a bunch of comics here that I would love to give you to read, because I think they're fantastic, and these are books that I've recommended via the cast, and I think other people should read them. So if you want a comics care package, get in touch and DM us, and we can arrange that, and we can get that sent out to you if you feel like you want one, or if you know someone that could do with a pick-me-up that would like something like that, then you know, get in touch, and what a wonderful surprise for them it will be to get a nice little comics care package. You can find me on Twitter under @Batto. That's BATTOU. Again, talk to me about comics. It's what I love. Ray, where can we find you?
Also on Twitter @Monkeh, MOONKEH.
And Leon, where can we find you?
You can also find me on Twitter @Leon Everett.
Yes, and that has been Ace Comicals 103. Ace Comicals, over and out.